Fish and Wildlife Service's National Conservation Training Center, or NCTC, in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I also coordinate the Native Youth Climate Adaptation Leadership Congress, which is a week-long on-site program for Indigenous high school youth held at NCTC. Today, we welcome your questions and comments anytime during the presentation. Please enter them into the chat or feel free to email them to broadcast@fws.gov. If we don't get to your comments or questions today, we'll do our best to follow up with you afterwards. Prior to introducing our guest speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that the National Conservation Training Center is located on the ancestral lands of many Indigenous peoples. Due to the painful history of forceful removal, we could not find a full account of the Indigenous peoples who occupied this land that was taken from them. We are aware that many Indigenous peoples traversed, cherished, and lived on this land, and they include, but are not limited to, the Massawomack, the Haudenosaunee, the Shawnee, and the Delaware. As we learn more about the Indigenous peoples who had and continue to have relationships with this land, we better appreciate the good earth on which we work, live, and learn. We are committed to building and sustaining relationships by highlighting Indigenous communities, offering Indigenous-based webinars, and sponsoring programs and activities for Indigenous youth. We encourage others to learn more about the land on which they work and reside. Today, we are going to hear from Troy Heinert with the Intertribal Buffalo Council, or ITBC. Troy Sichangu Lakota is the Executive Director of the Intertribal Buffalo Council. Troy lives with his wife, Gina, and their youngest son, Harold, on their ranch on the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation in south central South Dakota. He is also a professional rodeo pickup man and the South Dakota Senate Minority Leader. Troy, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to hear about the Intertribal Buffalo Council and what ITBC is up to for its 30th anniversary.
What I said was, hello relatives, with a good heart, I shake your hand. My name is Troy Heinert. Thank you for having me, Jennifer. I'm really excited about this, and thank you to all the guests who are joining us today. If we could go ahead and start the PowerPoint. So we titled this Restoring the Circle. And when you think about the connection between Indigenous people and buffalo, you know, it goes back to the earliest of times. The buffalo were everything to Indigenous cultures, clear across North America, and especially here in the Northern Plains, where we followed the buffalo, and the buffalo provided not only food, but clothing, shelter, tools, and also they gave us a way of life. You know, as I travel across the country restoring buffalo back to tribal nations, we see the songs and the ceremonies and hear the stories of what the buffalo meant to those tribes and to those areas. So at ITBC, we are the Intertribal Buffalo Council. We are in our 30th year of existence. Our office is located in Rapid City, South Dakota. Though our board members we have 9 board members, and they are broke up by regions. And our president currently, Urban Carlson, resides on Blackfeet Reservation in Browning, Montana. Next slide, please. So who we are. ITBC, early on, you know, 30 years ago, there was about 9 tribes that gathered together and decided that, you know, they needed to do something to restore this indigenous food source and bring back that relationship that indigenous people have always had with buffalo. So our mission is to restore buffalo to Indian country, to preserve our historical, cultural, traditional, and spiritual relationship for future generations. I'm sure you're all aware of what happened to the buffalo, which once numbered in the millions and were nearly extinct, not because they didn't like buffalo, but because it was a way to control us as indigenous people. So our mission, and those early founders' mission, was to reestablish that connection that was lost so many years ago. We started as a 501c3, and then in 2009 we became a federally chartered Indian organization under the IRA, under Section 17 of the IRA, and became the Intertribal Buffalo Council. So what that means is, oftentimes as we talk with our federal partners, we are treated the same as what any federally recognized tribe. Next slide, please. So currently we have 78 member tribes across 20 states. Those 78 member tribes have 55 herds between them. Over 20,000 buffalo are managed by those tribes. There's 32 million acres of tribal lands and over 1 million enrolled tribal members just in ITBC membership. Now, the number 78, that's soon to change, as we have 3 more tribes that are going to become full members at our next membership meeting here in November. So we are excited about that. Next slide. What do we do? We get asked that question quite often. So we provide technical assistance to tribes. When you think about tribes and their buffalo programs, many tribes are dealing with lots of other issues. Public safety, healthcare, schools, social services, and so their buffalo program, though they want to have it and they support it, there's not a lot of resources directed to their buffalo programs. And many of those programs are designed to be self-sufficient. So the technical services piece, we work with our member tribes and provide trainings, other curriculum, management plans. We do site visits that look at their herd health, as well as their land health, and are they able to either manage that amount of buffalo, or could they take on more, or how do they go about establishing a herd. Herd development grants. We receive some direct funding from the BIA. It's currently we're funded at about 1.3 million. 1.35, and we put out a RFP process to any tribe that's a member, and they send us their application, and we go through them and see where we can help, whether that's with fencing, personnel, equipment, animal ID, anything that's going to enhance their program. We try to find them some resources for that. Now, with that many tribes and that many herds, obviously the amount of money that we are able to assist with is not that great, but we try to do the best we can. Last year we had 39 tribes apply. There were over $5 million in requests, but we only had the 1.35 to distribute. So we came up with a formula that not only met, some of the needs that we saw across all 39, like salaries and fencing, but then we also took into consideration the amount of buffalo that that tribe is managing. We also run a surplus buffalo program. So any surplus animal coming off of a national park or national grassland, we have access to, we have MOUs with most of those parks and federal herds that we will take the surplus animals and redistribute those to tribes across the country. It's similar to how we do the herd development grant program. We send out an RFP. Tribes let us know what they're looking for, whether that's certain demographics, certain genealogy or lineage, and we try to match up what we can with what's available to get those tribes the animals that they're looking for. Last year we did just over 400 animals in the surplus program. This year we are looking at close to 1,500, between 1,500 and 2,000 animals that will be relocating within the next couple months. Next slide, please. Economic development. As tribes begin to build their capacity and use the meat at the local level, whether that's in their grocery stores, their school lunch program, or in their casinos. We also assist them with the marketing of live animals for sale to increase genetics in other places, and then the value-added products like the hunts, the hides, mounts, hair, tourism. So we provide some assistance with tribes on how to get started down the economic development portion of that. But keep in mind, tribes do not view buffalo as a commercial endeavor. This is, buffalo are viewed as relatives by tribes, and we try to treat them as such. The next part of that slide talks about food sovereignty. And, that's really something that when the buffalo were nearly decimated, we lost that food sovereignty. And trying to reconnect, put buffalo back into the diets of indigenous people, we've shown studies that it increased not only brain function for school-age children, but it helps with diabetes and some of the other health disparities that tribal people face. And it really helps just create that connection through cultural harvests, getting both young and old out there to be part of the harvest and see where their food comes from, and reconnecting to our ancestors. Partnerships, tribal entities, federal agencies, private organizations. ITBC is looked at as the agency to go to, or the entity to go to when we start talking about buffalo relocation and what buffalo means for tribes. And how is this done? With our 30-year history, we've had lots of expertise in getting buffalo out to tribes, making sure they're managed correctly, and providing those resources, and seeing what can come from tribes and their management of buffalo, and then help them with that reconnection to their history. Policy work, the National Bison Legacy Act, which we were fortunate enough to get passed, the Indian Buffalo Management Act, which is currently sitting on the Senate side. It's already passed the House. We're waiting for a hearing at the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. The Interagency Bison Management Plan, or the IBMP, that is the plan that was put together with many different agencies about what happens with Yellowstone buffalo. And ITBC is one of the 9 members of the IBMP. And, we advocate for live buffalo to be removed out of Yellowstone in a safe manner. And, obviously our tribes are very, Yellowstone buffalo are sought after by our tribes because genetically that's as close to the buffalo that provided for our ancestors that we can get. We work with the USDA, both FSIS and APHIS. FSIS recently had to hold some hearings as to whether buffalo should become an amenable species. It's tribal positions that that we would like buffalo to remain non-amenable. APHIS, they're the agency that handles disease testing and then with the quarantine process out of Yellowstone. So we try to work closely with them and follow the science and see what's accurate and what can be done to get live buffalo out of Yellowstone as quick as possible in a safe manner. Department of Interior, NPS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the BIA, obviously those are very important partners to ITBC and to our member tribes. And I think we provide a good conduit between those agencies and the tribes that we represent to make sure the transfers go smoothly, make sure we're getting the right demographic, the right genealogy, and the right science and support behind what tribes are trying to do with their buffalo restoration projects. Next slide, please. This year we've had some new endeavors at ITBC. We started 2 new programs. We had an internship in cooperation with Defenders of, with Yellowstone Forever on providing interns at Yellowstone Park. Now, originally it was written for 2 interns for the summer. And we had over 80 applications of tribal youth wanting to become interns at Yellowstone National Park. So we were able to change that the time frame and move that from 2 to 4. So we hosted 2 interns in the spring for 11 weeks, and then we have 2 interns that are just about to finish up the fall session. The amount of tribal youth and the applications that we received just from that program were tremendous. I wish we could have hired all 80 of those kids, but it also led to us being able to find a couple of them that weren't selected for that program, and we were able to bring them in right into the ITBC office and work directly with tribes. So that was very beneficial. The other was the Red Calf cohort. And we took high school kids. We did a week-long camp in the Black Hills. And then we had a couple, and that was in early June. And then we had a couple of assignments, throughout the summer. And then we did a week-long camp in Yellowstone. And it was about, connecting these young high school students to buffalo, the landscape, to science and technology. And, how could they go back and help their people? Or is this a field that they would be interested in? I can report that, all of the students that applied and participated in this program really enjoyed that program. It was really neat to see them being part of what happens with buffalo, and I think it really energized their love of buffalo and how they could use buffalo to help their tribe. Climate change. The administration had put out climate change is big on their radar, and we applied for a few grants. Some we haven't heard back from yet on the climate change, but what it really did in the office is allowed us to look at what buffalo do for the climate. There've been numerous studies about putting buffalo back on the landscape of what that does. And we were able to dive into that science. Buffalo are a keystone species. So, and what I mean by that is when you have buffalo on the landscape, just by the way that they're designed, if you let them be buffalo, that changes things for all the other wildlife in the area. So from the way that their hooves are designed that are very sharp and pierce deep into the ground, well, the seeds get planted and are allowed to germinate better in those areas. The buffalo wallers that buffalo create while they're rolling out in the pasture, well, those collect rainwater, and with that come other animals that are able to access water, as well as the insects and birds that will then come up and hang out at those buffalo waller sites. That increases biodiversity, plant diversity, even the way their hair, when they start to lose their hair in the spring, and the birds use that as insulation for their nests. When we say buffalo is a keystone species, we mean it, and there's science to back that up. Conservation of lands. Like I said before, the way buffalo graze, they're intense grazers that graze off a spot and move rather quickly, which allows regeneration and regrowth of those lands. They're easier on the land than other domestic forms of grazing. So we see that as a win-win. The way they keep woody underbrush at bay. It really is conservation and a way to restore lands that maybe at one time were overgrazed or abused through other practices. Seed collection. This is brand new for us. We have a contract with Wind Cave National Park to start doing seed collection on native grasslands. We're looking at going to Rosebud, Oglala, and Cheyenne River just because of their proximity, and be able to gather native grass seeds so that we have a place for storage and a seed bank that tribes can then get seeds to replant some of their pastures and their lands. And food sovereignty. If anything, the COVID pandemic has shown us is that even though we live in a very abundant area, we had a lot of food insecurity. Most tribes have extractive economies, so everything that is grown there and raised there leaves and doesn't stay there. And we're trying to help tribes change that cycle so that the meat that is grown there stays there and helps their tribal membership, as well as other plants and vegetables that tribes could grow and help their membership with food sovereignty. Next slide, please. So what is our connection? First and foremost, everything we try to do at ITBC has to have that culture behind it. And what is that connection to the buffalo? And that's what really drives us as we start to restore buffalo back to tribal lands in a culturally appropriate manner. Sovereignty. With 78, 79 member tribes, we need to respect those tribes' sovereignty and how they're going to manage their buffalo. Each tribe is different. Buffalo mean different things to different tribes, and we try to respect that. So a lot of the work that we do with our partners, especially at the federal level on a program, and that comes to us, we have that relationship already with the tribe, and we're able to navigate that so they get the resources while respecting their sovereignty. Ecology, the restoration of tribal lands. For many years, tribes were taken advantage of with the lands that they had, and when we can come back and help tribes restore buffalo and restore those lands to what they once looked like, that's something that's very important to ITBC. Sustenance. you know, we know what happened to the buffalo, and we don't want to see that happen again. And if we are able to help tribes manage their buffalo, where they can get buffalo meat, into their elder programs or their school lunch programs, or in their grocery stores or casinos, that's a product that's raised locally, grown locally, and takes care of our people the way that we're supposed to. Economy. We do have tribes that have capacities for large meat sales or hide sales, or the hunts. So establishing this kind of Indian tribal buffalo economy is important, and it's really starting from the ground up. What does that look like for each tribe, and in a way that always has our culture behind it. Statute and policy. We know we cannot do this without partners, and we look a lot to what the federal government, the assistance that they've provided the fishing tribes in the Northwest to restore that indigenous food service. So we're really striving to restore or food source. I'm sorry. We're really striving to restore buffalo as our indigenous food source. And we think that the advocacy work that we're doing on behalf of tribes on statute and policy is very important, because tribes can't do it on their own. ITBC can't do it on our own. We need to have federal partners and other partners to make this a reality. And then spirituality. That's in our mission statement. When you think about how what buffalo meant, as a Lakota, our own creation story, the buffalo led us out of Wind Cave, and it taught us how to behave. The white buffalo calf woman was the one who brought us our sacred pipe. So buffalo have that spiritual connection that you just don't find in commercial endeavors, and we try to enhance that or support that from every tribe. When you go down to the Southwest and those pueblos in New Mexico, though they're small land-based tribes, that connection with buffalo is still alive and well. And though it's at a lot smaller scale than where it used to be, it's very important that we support those efforts and keep that spirituality and those songs and those ceremonies that have been around for generations, that we keep them alive. And that's that really drives us as well. Next slide, please. So this was a quote, and I thought it was important. This goes back to right before the IBMP was started, and nobody really knew what to do with the buffalo coming out of Yellowstone. You had groups like us, advocating for live removal. You had some who wanted to sell hunts. You had some people who wanted to sell hunts. The state of Montana, and other people who wanted to just slaughter anything that came out. And so this quote was in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, and I'll read it for you. In some ways, the dispute shows how little has changed in the social forces that shape the West. It pits the values of settlers against the values of wildness, cows against bison, and even cowboys against Indians. And when you think about that, has that mentality changed? Has that mentality changed since the pictures of, the stacks and stacks of skulls of buffalo that were killed to create fertilizer? This is clear into 1994, and what was going on with the IBMP or with Yellowstone buffalo. And what does that look like today in 2022? There's still the friction between, cows and buffalo. There's still the friction between tribal and non-tribal. And There's still the friction between, who has control of tribal land, should the leaser or the tribe. And those are the things that we have to work through as tribes try to gain their capacity and bring buffalo back to their people. These are a lot of the sentiments that are out there. That's not a lot different than 150 years ago. Next slide, please. So this was a very exciting time for us. It's the first time I know anybody had pulled this off. So we had some Yellowstone buffalo that were in the quarantine facility at Fort Peck, and we were approached by a member tribe, the Alutiiq tribe of Old Harbor in Alaska, about their buffalo program, and they had some buffalo which are located on Kodiak Island. But what was unique about them is their main food source, the caribou, because of climate change and maybe some hunting practices, were diminished so much that they were losing a protein source. And so we worked with them to get that herd started. And in 2020, we had some buffalo that were some Yellowstone buffalo that were ready to, they were finishing their quarantine process at Fort Peck. So we actually started to figure out, how do we get some Yellowstone bulls to Alaska? And we designed those shipping containers. We cut holes in them. You can see at the very top of them, I know they're not the best picture, but those are all open air. We put some doors in, so on the top, so they could be fed and watered. And we kind of rigged this up thinking, okay, well, this is how we're going to work. This is how this could work. We walked into the FedEx station and said, we have some crates we would like to ship to Alaska. And the people's face when we told them what we were shipping, I think they thought we were crazy. But anyway, by the time we did the math and figured out that it was possible, so we loaded those buffalo on those crates, drove them to Seattle. At Seattle, they then got on a plane and went to Alaska. From there, they were offloaded onto a truck, which was taken down to a barge. Then they were craned onto the barge and then pulled up to the beach and opened the gates off the crates, and those 3 buffalo ran off onto the beach. And there's a video that one of our board members, Melissa Burns, who is from Old Harbor, they created a really neat video of this journey. And at the end, as the buffalo take off down the beach and kind of head up the hill, all 3 of them stop and turn around and look at the barge. And for me, there's just this sense of those buffalo were looking at us and saying, "Don't worry, we're going to take care of these people," and that's what buffalo mean to us. So it's a great story. Sometime if you get a chance to, and I'll try to share that video, or at least put it on our website, so you can check that out. It's something that I'll never forget. Next slide, please. So, how does this work? We establish the partnerships. We do the RFPs. We evaluate. We look at logistics, the trucking, the interstate requirements, roundup assistance. And I'm speaking right now about our surplus program. And these are the partners that we currently have. Many of them we have MOUs with, obviously national parks, Wildlife Service, the Nature Conservancy, U.S. Forest Service, the Denver Zoo, American Prairie Reserve. Those are all places that we currently access buffalo. And, I think through our track record, we show up, we take biosecurity very seriously. We show up, make sure we have the adequate trailers for what we're trying to do, that they're clean, they're on time. And we try to treat the buffalo the best we can in this transportation. You have to remember, as buffalo are coming off of these wild areas, they've never been in a trailer before. They've never seen anything like this, and they're going to start their new life in another location. And buffalo are a lot like homing pigeons. They want to return to where they were born. So, we work with tribes to establish those kind of quarantine or settling in periods to make sure that buffalo, adjust to their new home, that there's no sickness that could be given to their current herds. But, all of those partners are very, very important to make this happen. And here is a map of where we have been. Over the years, we've transported over 12,000 buffalo through our surplus program, and those dots are broken up by region. But you see, where, and we actually need to update our map because we now have buffalo, and we shipped buffalo to New York and to some other new member tribes. So here's a picture during 2020 when we had some food sovereignty issues. We were able to process some buffalo and get that out to communities so that they could prepare that buffalo and get it out to their community members. This is a group of high school kids that have never had a chance to cook with buffalo before, and we were able to provide that and provide meals to many tribal members during that time. Next slide, please. We go back to the spirituality and that culture. Here you see a prayer being offered prior to processing of an animal that was put down. That doesn't happen at commercial locations. Our way of thinking is that buffalo gives his life, and the best way to do that is if he still has grass in his mouth from where he was raised. So we try to do as much field harvest as we can. And it's also a learning opportunity for tribal people to break down a buffalo. I don't know if any of you have ever processed a buffalo, but it is a lot of work. They're a large animal. And when you do that, on your homelands with those elders or with the young ones who you're teaching, it's such a good hands-on experience, and you get to talk about what each part was used for traditionally and what we're going to use it for now. From hooves to organs to bones to hide. It's such a connection to our ancestors that that's really hard to replicate in any other way. Co-management. Obviously this has been talked about quite often recently, and that for ITBC, Yellowstone is working very hard to expand the bison transfer program. Working with APHIS to shorten some of those quarantine times is going to be extremely important. Every live buffalo that we get out of Yellowstone that goes to a tribal land, that's a that can only come from there, and it only helps tribes. Nobody else has access to those animals. So every animal that we can get out of there live, that is a success. The tribal involvement, like I said before, tribes deal with many issues, and a lot of times, the buffalo program might take a back seat, but they really rely on ITBC to be a voice at those meetings and to make decisions and to find resources to help their programs. That's what we do. The new partnerships, internship program, engaging the youth is going to be, it's in our charter, it's in our bylaws, and now I think we've found a couple ways where we can engage our youth in meaningful ways that might interest them to pursue a career in either natural resources or with their own tribe's buffalo program, or maybe they'll want to raise buffalo on their own. We've done some contract work with USDA about converting from cattle to bison. That booklet should be coming out very shortly. But that youth, there is no way we can continue this if we don't engage our youth. The Buffalo Seed Keepers program, I talked a little bit about that, about collecting seeds, at tribal areas. And then, and that takes place at Wind Cave. And then, also the ability for ITBC and tribes to co-manage, these federal areas. As Indian people, we've always been told, get an education, come back and help your people. Well, there's a bunch of us who have done that now, and we're ready to step up. And tribes are building their capacities and, flexing that trust responsibility and that relationship with the federal government. And a lot of them are relying on ITBC to be part of that process. So, we're excited about this. Of course, it's new, or it's fairly new, co-management of these federal areas. But I think our tribes and ITBC, we're ready for that challenge. Next slide, please. Um, 638 contracts. Actually, the Seed Keepers program, though we think that we could have 638'd it, we actually entered into a contract just because nobody really knew what that looked like. So, there's a lot of things that we need to kind of flesh out so that everybody's on the same page and knows who can do what and how it can be done. 2022, the bison range at Salish Kootenai and the Flathead Reservation, that was turned over to the Salish Kootenai people in a co-management style. There's lots of other areas that are traditional homelands of Native people, and some of them still, most of them still have treaty rights to those areas, and co-management could be a way to fulfill that treaty obligation, as well as build capacities with tribes. More than 600 contracts with IHS and BIA, but there are only 12 contracts on land management agencies with DOI. And I threw that statistic in there. just because when you think about all of the 638 contracts that are out there, whether that's public safety, schools, healthcare, even solid waste removal or water resources. There's a lot out there. There's just not a lot of land and really wildlife management. So I'm excited to see where these 638 contracts and co-management, where we could be part of those conversations and help tribes and help federal agencies manage those resources in a spirit of cooperation and in a productive manner. Next slide, please. So this is our red calf cohort. These are our high school kids that were at Yellowstone. We had kids from Minnesota, Las Vegas, one from South Dakota, some from Kansas. That's just thought it was a neat picture of them at Yellowstone. Next slide. Well, Pilama Yolo, thank you. This is my contact information. That's my cell number. I'm excited to looks like we still have a little bit of time for questions. I didn't waste the whole amount or the whole hour. So I'll stand by for questions. And if we don't get to them today, please reach out to me at any time. I'd be glad to visit with you.
Great. Thank you, Troy, for sharing with us today about ITBC. We do have a few minutes left for questions. So if you have any questions for Troy, please enter them into the chat and we'll address those. We did receive one so far. And is it safe to assume that the buffalo are only being distributed to states where they were indigenous to?
Well, in our estimation, buffalo are indigenous to every state, maybe not Hawaii, but there's a connection to buffalo everywhere. Our member tribes obviously are located in states that were predominantly buffalo range and buffalo habitat, but historically buffalo went from South America clear up into Canada. So
yes, and so this is kind of related to that. Can you talk a little bit more about sending the southern area buffalo to Alaska? I think the northern buffalo were a subspecies of the American buffalo. And do they fare well? How do they acclimate?
So there are really two types of buffalo. There's the woodlands buffalo, which live way in the north, that are built differently. You can tell by their stature, what they look like, and they're designed to move the heavy snow, kind of plow through that. The plains buffalo, or what everybody kind of gets that vision of what buffalo look like. Those had a very, very wide range. They're the ones that migrated, through Texas and Oklahoma, clear up here into the northern plains and roamed around, both east and west. Those are the kind you see at Yellowstone. Those are the kinds you see off to the east in their traditional homelands. Buffalo are highly adaptive. When we take buffalo out of the Grand Canyon, though they might be small in stature, we try to take young animals out of the Grand Canyon. That's just what they prefer. And they're small in stature compared to what buffalo look like up here. But within a couple years, you can't tell the difference. They've grown, and the heat and other buffalo are highly adaptive animals.
Oh, thank you. So here's a question. Is brucellosis a problem within the herds?
On tribal herds, no. And actually, brucellosis is not it's not a problem, even though Yellowstone is the only place that has a brucellosis, uh, I guess, contaminated herd. But the problem really isn't with the buffalo. The buffalo aren't spreading brucellosis. Brucellosis is spread through the afterbirth. So that means something would have to eat grass that a cow recently gave birth on, within 24 hours. So it's not the buffalo that are spreading brucellosis. It's actually the elk. I just say that the elk have better lobbyists. But most states are brucellosis free. South Dakota is a brucellosis free state. North Dakota. And we understand the quarantine process, and but we think that the science proves that we could shorten that quarantine process, especially for bulls. Bulls can't pass it anyway.
Okay, that's interesting. Personally, I'm curious about what brought you to the ITBC.
So, I handled the shipping for them for years. I rodeo all over the country. I've got contacts all over. I'm used to dealing with large, undomesticated animals. And so I handled the shipping for them for many years. I was finishing up my term in the legislature, and I was actually on a trip to get buffalo out of the Grand Canyon. And I was either going to run for governor, or I got encouraged to apply for the ED position. And this is something I've been part of. I've been part of those relocation efforts, and what it all means and how important it is, and the hope that it provides these tribal folks. And I thought, you know what, I've done 10 years of public service. I think I could help the organization, and I could really enjoy this. And so far, it's been about a year now, and I thought rodeoing was bad. They've had me all over the place, but it's been very, very worthwhile.
Awesome. There's always time to be governor. Let's see here. So you mentioned that they're the bison and the buffalo are very adaptable, but can you talk about anything about the dynamics of the herds? How are they complex? How do the new additions merge into the existing herds?
So buffalo are, they're a wild animal. They go into rut, for their breeding cycle. There's challenges to herd dominance. What happens is, buffalo try to live as family groups. So they kind of put their little group together, and that's how they live. Though they may live by, hundreds of other buffalo, they kind of have their own little groups. And when you introduce new animals into that mix, obviously there's a little bit of a getting to know you time. And a lot of bulls will come in and try to take those cows, or any young animals might get absorbed into a family group. Or those cows, if there's enough of them that we've sent, they may start their own. They may start their own family group, and then a couple of them kind of wander off, or a couple of them kind of wander in. So it's a unique dynamic. It depends on the tribe, though. Some tribes try to keep their buffalo separate. If they have a set of buffalo coming from a certain area, they might keep those buffalo together versus a set of buffalo from another area. So each tribe manages them as the best they see fit. But they're still a wild animal, and we try to let them be as close to buffalo as they can be.
Please plan to join us for our next Indigenous Connections broadcast on Wednesday, October 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be featuring a film titled Lake of Betrayal, Kinzua Dam, produced by Paul Lamont and Scott Sackett. This is a little different than what we traditionally offer, but we feel that this film is very moving. It's an eye-opening portrayal of what the Seneca Nation experienced with the creation of the Kinzua Dam. And as a reminder, each broadcast is recorded and available on NCTC's website. If you wish to learn more about past recordings, future broadcasts, or be added to the outreach list, please email myself, Jennifer Hill, at Jennifer_Hill at fws.gov. Thank you.